Warning: All Things Crime is a true crime production that may contain violent or disturbing material. Viewer or listener discretion is advised.
No one's perfect, nothing is perfect. That's what makes me have confidence. Now, of course, after our file, then it goes to the next steps. And there's a process. And I know people don't understand it looks awful, but it was still lawful thing. But there's not going to really be, I don't know many situations where everyone in the chain is corrupt. So you've got the local agency, the investigating agency, the prosecutor, the judge, that's what we say. So every single person in the process is corrupt. And it's just like, I just say, I know that we have our experiences. I think it's important to also kind of look at data too while we're doing this. And, there are a lot of different things, a lot of undertones with, the race thing, which I know a lot, we don't like to really kind of talk too much about that. But we just have a lot to work through, I guess. And it's a big job that it doesn't look like I'm going to be done before I retire. It looks like there's going to be some more work to do. Thankfully, in my state, I've already established good relationships with our media before crises happens. And so right now I'm doing like virtual chats with them, like Georgia has 11 media markets. And so I'll say Atlanta, hey, what's going on? Let's check in. Columbus. Prior to COVID, I'd have the media come to the GBI. Here, meet the director, meet our command staff. Here's our bomb unit. Here's our crime scene unit. And that way we can have these relationships. That way, when there's maybe like a little bit of a delay because folks are working, they're as patient as the media can be. So I don't too much worry about the media sort of betraying me and putting stuff out and spinning a story out of control as much as I do social media.
Yeah, that's boy. I hope more PIOs, directors of communication out there are listening to this and learning from you. And I would hope that you would also even offer training, because how did you learn to do this? I guess that's a great question to ask, because what you're describing to me is the perfect, there's a fine line between putting out enough information and putting out too much information, because you can't, I think a lot of people, they don't fully understand, and the investigative process takes time. You can't, this isn't CSI, this isn't Hollywood. We can't solve this crime in 43 minutes. A lot of the investigators haven't even arrived on scene yet.
Yep.
And so, they don't know the answers yet. And so it's not like you guys aren't trying to inform the public on what's going on. It's just, you can't put out false information.
Right.
And you can't put out information you don't know yet. And so I think that vacuum that is created, especially with social media, is one of those things. It's, the immediate information that you have at your fingertips on your cell phone is incredible. You can learn about anything, anywhere in the world. But at the same time, the amount of false information that could be out there, and Lord forbid there's a video of it, then it's really bad.
Those viral videos are, they're so tough, because you see a snippet of something, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of things that you see. They don't look good, and in the end, it turns out. But oftentimes you see a snippet of something, and it's just not. It's not representative of what's going on. It just.
Well, there's no context.
There's no context to it. It just doesn't tell the full story. And I know it's really difficult for people to believe. And I know, even if I wasn't in this role, I'm sure I'd just be that one too. You see something on TV and you just kind of go with it. But it's just not the full story. And there's just so much more to it. And there's so many layers. And I know people they can't be patient, and they want answers right away. But I think that it's just really important. Even for like local law enforcement agencies, I'm working for a state agency, but it really starts with the local law enforcement agencies because, with all due respect to the states and the feds, local law enforcement agency, and I remember my previous director would always say this, they have more authority than state or the feds. And that's just the reality of it. And so, they're the ones we count on sort of most to work with their communities, to allow them, educate them on the work that we do, engage with them, all those sort of things that, we really, really tried to do in person beforehand and having to work around during COVID. But there are over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the nation. And so, 18,000 agencies doing things not exactly the same. And so that's how we're constructed. And I, still believe it's the best country to live in, absolutely, no matter all the things that I know we see on TV. But, you asked a question about, learning, and this is one of those things that you certainly day one don't have it all figured out. And I think about when I started on this side, 6 years ago, I'm just like, I cannot believe I did that. Like, that's just, I didn't know. And then also, I guess in my defense, things change a lot in this area. I thought working in the sciences and, keeping up with the trends and technology and, what's accepted in the scientific community. I thought that, things changed in that area, but I'm just like, whoa, things really change a lot, on this side. And it's extremely important that you don't sit out there on a silo, an island by yourself. Like, you have got to be plugged into some type of network. You have got to have not training just like one time when you start, but ongoing training to keep up with all of these trends and what's happening on social media. I personally am probably most active in a group called the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We have a PIO section, and I'm the vice chair of the Southeast region. And so that is what you said is exactly what we try to do, is try to make sure we get the network together, offer training opportunities, and, sometimes just check in. The summer of 2020, really all of 2020, I think we all just needed that, like, that kind of feeling and knowledge that you're not by yourself doing this, because it can be a very, taxing position to sit on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and watch people yell at you and read those comments and try to kind of navigate what's legitimate, what needs, a real response, what you need to ignore, what needs to be hidden because they're, using profanity and trying to work around it. And so you got to be part of a network. And, some people probably get into it and don't get any type of training. That is definitely not the way. And you can certainly see it in the communication that goes out, the press conferences. It's just like, oh my goodness. But what happens is that one bad interview or that one bad press statement, guess what? It now represents every single police officer. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know another profession where, one person, and I get it, I completely get it. You've got bad apples everywhere, but it's like that one, next thing you know, it's everyone. It's not localized. It's every single police officer is like this.
I honestly,
don't like
though,
it.
Nelly, I
Mhm.
don't know any other profession where if one bad apple is discovered, the entire law enforcement community is completely held to account. And
I don't
I,
either. I can't
uh,
think of any. I've tried to think of one. I've not been able
yeah,
to come up with
it's
one.
like I've been really fortunate with all things crime that I've
Mhm.
been able to interview Dion Joseph. I know he's been in the news a lot
Mhm.
with this LeBron James thing,
Mhm.
and Zeke Arkham, who's out of New York. He came on the show, and fantastic guy. And I would love to connect all of you guys too, because I think a lot of your message is the same.
Mhm.
And most importantly, it's so unfair. If a doctor does a really poor surgery, the entire medical profession isn't ostracized and villainized
Right.
because of that one mistake. But with law enforcement, oh, it's just incredible. Everybody is held to account for one person's sin, and that's just not right. And that,
Yeah.
yeah, another reason why I actually started this is because I want people to understand the entire process. But cops are humans too. I got neighbors that are cops, and they're great people. I
Right.
would hang out with them all the time. I see them out mowing their lawn, and they're just like the rest of us. And every single time they put on the uniform, their number one goal is to get back to their family at the end of their shift. And
Right.
well, I think Zeke also said, when you are putting somebody under arrest, you're taking them into custody and they don't want to be into custody, it is never pretty. But that's the narrative that you have to counter, because there's no good way to do that. And I don't know, people just don't understand it. It's like, what is this officer supposed to do? If the guy's resisting arrest, what is the officer supposed to do? He can't just let him go.
Yeah,
That's
and it's not easy, and we just try to literally state the facts of what happens. And I know a lot of people don't trust in the process and all of that. And I think I can't speak for the nation, even though I know one officer apparently represents the whole profession. Honestly, I can really speak from my own experience, and I know that I am communicating with our agents they're investigating these cases. Last year, it was almost 100 officer-involved shootings in Georgia that the GBI investigated. We're on that same track this year, and I am in all of those cases, getting the information of what can be put out. And most of those cases, obviously, the majority of the cases, police are usually they're called as a 911 call. They're responding to something based upon that call, and they get to the scene, they're engaged in a gun battle, and the officer prevails. That's a lot of the cases. I mean, some of them may start at a traffic stop. It may be a domestic. It may be, we have a few suicide by cops. We have a lot of those. The times where we had a case where I was like, uh-oh, I'll be honest with you, it's not looking too great. I'm telling you, Jared, I like to every single time the result was, unfortunately, we had to arrest an officer, and that's happened. And there's not one case that I can say, at least for the part that we played, in the investigative process, that I'm like, that really should have gone another way. I think based on these facts that were presented. So that's why I think I can have, no one's perfect, nothing is perfect, but that's what makes me have confidence. Now, of course, after our file, then it goes to the next steps, and there's a process. And I know people don't understand it looks awful, but it was still lawful thing. But there's not going to really be, I don't know many situations where everyone in the chain is corrupt. So you've got the local agency, the investigating agency, the prosecutor, the judge, that's what we say. So every single person in the process is corrupt. And it's just like, I just say, I know that we have our experiences. I think it's important to also kind of look at data too while we're doing this. And, there are a lot of different things, a lot of undertones with, the race thing, which I know a lot of, we don't like to really kind of talk too much about that. But we just have a lot to work through, I guess. And it's a big job that it doesn't look like I'm going to be done before I retire. It looks like there's going to be some more work to do.
Yeah, there's so many factors that go into it. But I think, again, based on my experience with working with law enforcement, working with crime labs, and getting to know more and more folks like you, I think the number one message and correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, the number one thing is saying, look, we are in a now world, but an investigative process has to go through the entire process. You can't just jump to conclusions, because most often those conclusions are wrong, and you're not helping anybody by speculating, by jumping to conclusions, by not giving context. All of that has to come into play, because the last thing we want is to go down one direction thinking that we have all the facts, and then facts come out that totally dispute that story, and you have to go a different direction. That's a nightmare. Issuing corrections.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are not fun.
Well, especially somebody in your position where you actually represent the entire GBI. What a nightmare if you actually put out false information. You can't do that.
Exactly. And sometimes we put out information based on what we had. We had a case. Oh my goodness! Since it's still open, I won't disclose all details. But we put out information based on preliminary interviews that was done, reviewing of the body cam, but the body cam fell off during the incident. And there were people in the parking lot, so there was cell phone video that started to circulate on social media. Oh my goodness. And of course our story had already gone out, and though it wasn't false, it was based upon what we had. That was a time where we had to immediately say, okay, now we've got the cell phone video, because lots of times people don't turn that into the police. Oh no, I'm not going to give it to the police, so we don't have it. So we're going based on what we have. And so the additional video came in, there was additional surveillance video, and we updated the story right away. Hey, we have new information, here it is. We went, I remember it was a Saturday, went and I called the director, I said, I think we need to go in and try to explain this in person. We did a press conference at GBI headquarters, and no one even looked at us and said, why did you mislead us? They didn't, that wasn't even the thing. They were, focused on the case. So a real struggle to try to keep up with it, but people, I know that they don't want to have patience, but you just gotta give law enforcement a chance to work the case. And that's really it. I mean, there are a lot of cases I've seen recently where, we put some information out, and, sometimes the family, they just, they don't believe it. And oftentimes they may not have the luxury of having, say, body cam video, like they're not investigators, or they don't have all the evidence in front of them, and they'll go and they'll hold press conference. And I've seen it very recently, literally just kind of make stuff up. My loved one did not have this weapon, or whatever the case may be. Then later on, then they have an opportunity to get more information and see some visual evidence, and then it's like you're having to kind of backtrack, and then the story becomes something different. But oftentimes people have already seen that and they've made up their minds. And I've seen stories where that's happened over the years, and we show them the evidence, and we let them know. I mean, we probably release more information in an officer-involved shooting, obviously, than we would in any other type of case. I know that it makes prosecutors just cringe, but it's just one of those things where people are so interested in what's happening outside of just the family. But we want to make sure that people on social media, the public, constituents, that they know, like, this is the update, this is what's going on, this is what we found. And I'm telling you, when you do that, all those questions, all those stories, they really will settle down. But you got to catch it. It's like, it's more art than science. I've heard that said so many times, and now I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see this, because there's not one specific equation, and it's not one, hey, if you follow this set of rules, step 1 through 8, and don't skip, step 4, it's going to happen this way every single time. But there is some basic principles that work, that you really should work on following. But I tell you, it's a constant struggle to balance it all.
Well, in that sense, it's got to be fun in some ways, right? It at least a challenge.
It is, and that's, I don't know, people think I'm half crazy, because I can't like pull myself away, because it's a lot of interesting work that gets done. And as a representing the agency, I'm not just dealing with the investigative division. Now, I spend most of my time with the investigative division. I do, but I'm also keeping up with what's happening in the crime lab, and that's really interesting to me for the obvious reasons. We have what's called the Georgia Crime Information Center. It's our criminal justice information highway. And then you can't forget, I'm also a legislative liaison. So I'm under the Gold Dome every day during session, and I'm having, the relationships that I would build, say, with the media, the public. Now I'm having to build these relationships with our senators, our state representatives, other lobbyists, to try to get bills through, GBI legislation through. And I'm just like, this was kind of my dream job, one of those, hey, right before I retire. So I was really, really, amazed, grateful, and all of that, to be able to jump into it at this point. But every 5 minutes is something different. And I'm just it's really,
busy
it's
girl.
interesting. It's interesting.
You are a busy, busy girl.
Mhm.